Hello， 亲爱的朋友，大家好，我是杨世华。今天非常荣幸接受河流出版社的邀请，来到这里跟大家见面。我也是一个家族系统排列的爱好者和受惠者。这一次史瓦吉多来台湾，他主要也在说家族系统里面的创伤会如何一代一代的传下去。我们每一个人如果能够离开家族的创伤，我们就能够把自己发展得非常好。在这里祝福所有的朋友们，我们每一个人都找到我们最满意的自己。
大家好，我是徐秀清，很高兴有机会来到河流。我学习服务系统排列20年，到现在我的生活起了很大的改变。你们有机会可以认识排列，得到更好的视野看待自己的家族，还有疗愈，然后能够一起走在生命更有爱的旅程。
So what you would like to talk about today?
我对于老师在世界各地排列，那么我很好奇，老师对于在不同文化的排列上面有什么发现呢？
The family constellation laws, they are universal, so they are not depending on the culture or the country. What is different in different countries or cultures is that they experience different traumas in the past. But the laws of human relation and interaction and the way the human mind functions, it doesn't matter whether it is in China or in any other country. So we are looking at principles of human interaction. So, of course, when I come here, I deal with many traumas that are related to China and to many things that happen here, no? Because China is a country with multiple traumas, no? So, when you work with a person, the traumas of the past, they show up. So one understands more about the culture through working with the people from that culture. So I like that because I travel 15, 20 countries every year. So I learn a lot about different cultures and countries. And now this is the first time it makes sense to know something about history, because what happened in the past has an influence on our life now. So in family constellation, we call this collective trauma or transgenerational trauma that travels from one generation to the next. And if people don't heal these traumas, then they tend to repeat the past. For example, if there was poverty in the past and people starved, and people feel that without healing it, then they start behaving now as if they are in danger of surviving. Even the danger is not there right now. It was there maybe 100 years ago. So that's why I'm saying, if you don't heal the collective trauma, you tend to repeat in your behavior the pattern or the way people in the past behaved. So in that way, family constellation helps us to live more in the present. So in a way, it also is a meditative approach, because meditation is also about learning to be in the present.
我这一次上课当了2个代表，一个外婆从大陆来台湾，然后他的儿子死掉了，然后我整个人没办法起来，直到那个孙女过来跟我鞠躬，然后忽然觉得我不一样了，然后我想要祝福这一切，然后感动生命传下来。
Yeah, so that shows that our ancestors, they want to be acknowledged and recognized. So they don't want that we repeat their suffering, but they want that we see them and recognize them. And then they become a blessing to our life, actually. So if we can get the blessing from our ancestors, we become stronger and we are grounded, and we also have more freedom to live our own life and destiny. And if we don't honor our ancestors, we tend to identify and repeat their life. So that is a principle of the work, in a way, you can say. If you honor the past, you become free of the past.
还有多年前我自己当个案，然后面对我们家族很多被送养的长辈， 因为他们有的已经躺在地上了。老师要我跨过他们去面对我的生命，告诉我的生命说，从现在开始我会好好享受生命，对我的影响很大。
Yeah. So that's what we do, no? We honor some, we look at something, and then we can only let go of it. And that is not only with your ancestors like this, it's also with your parents like this. If you can honor what your mother has done for you, you become free of her to a certain degree. If you cannot honor your mother, you will be repeating her. So we see this often. People who say, I don't want to be like my mother, they become exactly like their mother. So that always shows that is a truth that we can see in life. No? So in other words, love makes you free. And if you want to be free without feeling love, you are bound.
就关于祖先的创伤，透过我们排列之后，对整个家族的影响，除了我们自己之外。
Well, it affects different people in different ways, no? In other words, the more a family member suffers, the more we feel bonded to that person. So trauma has a certain effect. Like if a group of people is challenged, they tend to bond together very strongly in order to survive, no? So cultures or social groups who are under attack, they tend to bond more closely together. So this is a survival measure by nature. You see that also in animals, no? If animals who are under attack want to survive, they tend to bond and stick together, then they have a bigger survival advantage. And we call this bonding. So the bonding has two effects. It has survival, it helps us to survive better, but on the long run, it also limits us. For example, you may survive, but because you're bonded, you repeat the suffering of your family members. Then it's difficult to be happy. So what we need to learn to do is we need to acknowledge bonding, because that is the biological aspect of love, you could say. And then we have to learn to grow beyond bonding. In other words, we have to learn that surviving is not good enough. We have to grow into our uniqueness and beauty. And that is only possible if we also learn to be alone. So only a person who learns to be alone and is ready to be alone can grow into his own potential. Also in a spiritual sense. The people who reach the highest state of consciousness, they are the people who are most alone. But one has to understand, being alone does not mean being lonely. So they are not lonely, because in loneliness we miss someone. Aloneness means I have found myself and I have learned to enjoy myself. And I have gone beyond needing anybody. Like in bonding, we need the group to survive. And when we move beyond bonding, we don't need anybody. So this is a learning step, and that is also spiritual development. And family constellation is a work that helps us in that direction.
我想到我50岁认识系统排列，然后我60岁决定去读硕士，就是因为我觉得我得到了一些不同的力量。然后我的硕士论文是关于已婚妇女的幸福感，以系统排列的实证研究，一共做了4次。
Well, I don't know if a married woman is necessarily happy, I question that. In fact, the reality is often the opposite. The moment you marry, you become unhappy. So this is often the dream that we have, that once I marry, I become happy. But the reality doesn't show that. Once you marry, you become often unhappy. So that is also very interesting, because it shows that we are learning something wrong. We are learning that being together makes you happy. And in fact, just the opposite is true. Learning to be alone and enjoying yourself is what makes you happy. So in other words, only two people who know how to be alone can also be happy together. But this is a very rare phenomenon. It is not what happens usually. So that's why there is actually a lot of misery, because we are learning something wrong. People believe that once I've married, I found my husband or my wife, then I have achieved. But you have not achieved anything. And very soon this shows up. And then the misery starts, no? So unless you learn a little bit about meditation and entering yourself, there is no way you can be happy, whether alone or in a relationship. So that's why I'm very focused in my work and in also my groups to help people to understand and to practice meditation. Because it is consciousness that leads to happiness, not being together. So we have to grow in awareness and consciousness. And family constellation is also helping us to be conscious, because the family constellation shows the truth of what happened in a relationship or between family members. It reveals the truth. So it helps you to grow your awareness. One cannot guarantee that after one session or even after 4 sessions that you are different. It depends on you, and it depends on people's willingness to give up their safety and security. Because when you are under the influence of bonding, it gives you a feeling of feeling safe and secure. And if you want to move away from bonding, you have to give up your security. And that creates fear in people. That's why sometimes they go to a therapy or to a group, they see something, they do a little bit, and then they fall back into doing what they did before because they got afraid. So it's not that the family constellation that is what saves people, it is your willingness to risk your comfort, your safety, your security, and to risk to be an outsider in a society. Because only if you're ready to be an outsider, you can grow into your potential. And you can see this. All great geniuses or enlightened people, they were all outsiders. And of course, that's the challenge here.
有序位观，我在什么位置，然后看到整体的时候，比较不会那么戏剧性。
Love takes you beyond yourself, you can say. So in bonding love, you only think of yourself. For example, children, they love their parents, but they love them because they need them. So in a way, it is a self-centered love. In conscious love, you consider the other than yourself. For example, sometimes when a parent dies and the children cry for the death of their parent, of course, it is a painful moment. But if you keep on crying, you're actually not thinking of your parent, you're thinking of yourself. You cry because you lost someone. So that's why in a constellation, I let people sometimes think of their parents, what is good for them. And then when you consider your dead parent, then you feel they don't want me to keep on crying for years. So I call this conscious love, and that only leads to true happiness. And this also sometimes we do in a constellation.
刚才我听到老师说那个静心的重要，然后老师也说到，当我们在做家族系统排列的时候，我们用一个静心的心情在这个场域里面。那么我有相同的经验，
这也让我们在服务的时候更有力量。
Yeah, but one has to understand a little bit more about honoring also, because honoring, it actually cannot be done. Honoring is like love. You cannot do love. So sometimes I see that sometimes in constellations, a constellator asks a client to honor the mother or the father or to bow down to them. And for me, sometimes that is funny because it is a little bit like a conditioning. When you were a child, you also learned you have to honor your parents. And that is like a conditioning. You have to honor your parents. And I don't think this has a really good effect. For me, honoring is more like if you understand something, honoring happens. That is true honoring. So if you understand something about your mother's life and what she had to go through or her family had to go through, if you truly understand it, you will start feeling some love. But it has nothing to do with I have to love my mother. So for me, true love is a byproduct of awareness, and there should be no have to. So sometimes I feel it is better if a person is true and they're angry with their mother because they feel like that, because you're at least true to yourself. And then if you keep on growing your awareness, then you also move beyond the anger and then love happens. So very often, true honoring or true love only happens after you have also passed through anger. If you have experienced your frustration, your disappointment, your anger, and you have consciously passed through that, and then something new happens. So it's important in a constellation not to impose some idea on the client or to tell them you have to love your mother. And sometimes this is not done rightly. And then constellation can also have a bad effect. So if we do constellation work, it has to be done with an understanding. So we are not against anything.
我也想要请教老师啊，我们华人都是非常重视祖先的，在过年过节，我们总是有很多的表示。
Yeah, but this is often the fake kind of honoring. It is a conditioning. You have to honor your ancestors. And that's why I often see people who do that, they have a lot of repressed anger and frustration. Because if you force somebody to be loving or to honor, then all the negativity becomes repressed. And then you become unable to honor someone in a true way. So that's why I want to clearly distinguish between the honoring that is a social conditioning and the honoring that comes out of awareness. So the honoring that you see in Chinese society often is not the true honoring.
通常我们所谓的家族业力就是祖先和子孙之间的连结和纠缠。那我们该如何去察觉呢？
Well, in a constellation, it shows. It shows your identification. In family constellation, we actually don't need to talk about karma. Karma basically is you are identifying with somebody in a previous generation. So the moment you understand it and you move out of the identification, your karma is finished. So people think often of karma as something that I can't do anything about. It is just a karma. So I'm helpless. It is just my karma to be like this. I don't see things in this way. For a conscious person, there is no karma. An enlightened person has no karma. So consciousness takes you out of karma or out of identification, which is better way of putting it. Karma often has a religious context, like religious teach you this is your karma and you have to suffer. And Christianity, because Adam and Eve, they disobeyed God, that's why we are still suffering. I don't like to look at things in this way, because then you become helpless. That means I have to suffer in this life, and I don't think so. Your suffering is in your hands and your responsibility. But sometimes people don't like that because often we don't like to take responsibility for our life. Then we say, okay, I can't do anything, it is just my karma.
所以老师会怎么看待？就是假设我们不说这个是家族业力，那么我们如何离开这个家族命运的循环呢？
You notice I am identifying with my grandfather, so I see him, and in a family constellation that's very beautiful because you put a representative for the grandfather and you stand in front of him, and then you realize this is my grandfather and this is me. My grandfather has his destiny and his life, and I have my life. So by seeing the other, you can move out of identification. So in a way, this is a very elegant way of moving out of identification. You see, all problems in life have to do with identification. In fact, everything. And family constellation is a very easy and very practical way how to move out of identification. So you see the other person, you are there, I'm here, we are separate. Identification means I feel as if I'm the other. Then you realize I'm not. Of course, it takes a little while to really do this step. Family constellation can take us there.
透过排列，我们可以看到这相关于我们生命的由来。那对于初次接触家族排列的人，老师有什么建议吗？
There's nothing specially to recommend, you just start. You see, that is also beautiful. In family constellation, everybody is a beginner, nobody is advanced. It is a very simple method, everybody immediately can understand it. Other therapists are a bit complicated, and you need some time to understand it. Family constellation is very easy. You look at your mother or your father and you immediately understand. Maybe you need time to understand something deeper, but something you can understand immediately. Maybe that's why it is also became very popular.
是，有时候我们一看到排出来家里的画面就很触动。
Yeah. Sometimes it touches us and sometimes we get identified. Also that has to be distinguished. Well, people who talk like this, that they reject a constellation that they experienced, they don't want to change. That means they don't want to move out of bonding because it means they have to separate from their parents and they don't want to do this. And this is often the case in situations where there is severe trauma and one does not want to leave one's family members. And this is also okay, I respect that. So I always respect if somebody doesn't want to change. I'm not forcing anybody that you have to do this or believe this or anything like this. I offer something and then you can either take it or you don't take it. And everybody is always free.
今天很高兴很感谢来到河流这边，然后可以请问斯瓦吉多得到很好很深刻的体会。
那今天我也是非常开心来到了河流，可以跟 Svagito 老师在一起，我们讨论了很多关于家族的课题，我们也讨论了很多关于创伤、关于业力的事情，我们有非常多的收获。非常谢谢 Svagito 老师。
Thank you also for the team of Riverflow
谢谢大家
who is filming here. Okay, so I'm very happy that I could come back to Taiwan after 4 years of interruption because of Corona, so I couldn't come. Otherwise, I came every year. And I'm very happy to work here in Taiwan because I feel people are really interested in personal growth and they are very receptive also to my work here. So, and now I'm also came with my new book. The company here, Riverflow, they published my new book on trauma and family constellation and they republished my old book. And I hope this will also help many people on their path. So I'm very glad that this could happen. Thank you very much.